How can the Minnesota Vikings beat the Philadelphia Eagles? We talked on X's and SKOLs about a few things. We're going to talk about more here on tonight's episode. It's going to be about stopping Jalen Hurts, who's going to play quarterback, and what Vikings injury could just throw a wrench into everything. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show, sponsored by our friends at Underdog Fantasy, where with the promo code Forno, on your first $5 play, you can get $100 in bonus credits. Perfect for tonight's game. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, Top Left Corners producer Dave. And Dave, we have some semi-breaking news here. According to Matt Zenitz, I think I pronounced that right, of CBS Sports, who's a college football and NFL insider, current expectations that Carson Wentz will start at quarterback for the Vikings against the Eagles. And that now kind of becomes the A topic. I had a feeling that was going to happen once I saw today's injury report, because one of the things that Kevin O'Connell has been very adamant about over the course of McCarthy's healing process is he wants him to have a full week of practice. He wants him to be able to have his feet underneath him. I'm very curious if McCarthy will be dressed for the game or if he will just not play at all, because that's the one curious thing to me where, hey, if push comes to shove, look, we know you're not ready, just go do the best you can kind of thing, or if he's just going to be inactive. I'm very curious about what they do there, but O'Connell's been very steadfast about this the entire time. He wants McCarthy to be 100%. He wants him to have the full week of practice, and he wasn't going to waver off of that. The fact that he was limited on Wednesday was like a small signal. Like, okay, maybe he's going to miss the game, but we still have 2 more days left. Now that he's limited again, that kind of says it's probably not going to happen this week, because now you have 2 days of limited. Because if you go limited day 1 and then full day 2, okay, now you're getting a lot more practice. You're getting those reps and you're getting improvement. McCarthy did say after Wednesday's practice that his ankle's not 100%. And what really drove me nuts was there was he said he got a few second opinions on it. And people were freaking out. Oh, Wentz is certainly going to start. Dog, those second opinions happened 4 weeks ago. They did not happen like on Tuesday. The second opinions happened after the injury because it's okay. He played the rest of the game with it. They taped it back up. He was fine. But kind of like what happened with McCarthy's torn meniscus. You have all this adrenaline pumping, and it's harder to notice an injury. It's harder to notice bumps and bruises. And because of that, now all of a sudden, an injury pops up the next day, and it's like, uh-oh, this stinks. And you try and figure out what the heck's going on. And they said 4 to 6 weeks. So Sunday will be 5 weeks removed from the injury to the day. And then the Vikings played the Chargers on Thursday. And somebody pointed it out. I can't remember who, but the Vikings will only have 2 games in a 28-day span between week 5 and week 9 because they had the bye week and then they play on Thursday. So they have a very condensed window of football. That's not necessarily ideal, but it kind of works out for this team who is trying to heal up their roster. And it's unfortunate that McCarthy's going to miss another game, but they're trying to do everything what's best for McCarthy for the long haul, not this year, for the next 15, and putting him out too early. You know, we've seen quarterbacks that have their confidence just shattered and it never comes back. So they're not trying to treat him with kid gloves. They're trying to treat him with care. They're trying to be a good parent, essentially. Like, if you really want to boil it down to a good metaphor, they're trying to be a good parent to him. Now, is it going to work? Who knows? We don't know anything about McCarthy, and anybody tries to tell you that they know about what McCarthy is going to be is lying to you, because we don't. We have 8 quarters. 7 of them were bad. 1 of them was incredible. That's too small of a sample size to write anybody on or off at this point. We think we can project with him, but nobody knows. And the fact that we have to wait another week. And guess what? He's probably going to now, if he misses Sunday's game officially, probably not going to play against the Chargers. But I wouldn't put it past O'Connell to be like, okay, we can project that his ankle is going to be ready for Thursday. Kid, go get the game plan for Thursday and get yourself head start on it, because it's a short week. And maybe he's planning to play Thursday.
That thought rolled across my mind today. Is he working on Thursday's game plan already?
Yeah, I would doubt that he's already doing it, but I bet if they rule him out, they'll probably just be like, hey, get the game plan ready. We want you to be ready for Thursday. And it can be like, hey, get super ready. Get yourself really acclimated to this whole process. Is it going to work? We'll find out. I don't have a read either way if he's going to end up playing in that game. My guess is he doesn't. But we don't even know if he's going to for sure play against the Eagles. We don't know if he's going to suit up. But the fact that Carson Wentz has been reported as a starter by somebody who is a reputable insider, it is what it is. I did think McCarthy was going to start this game. I thought he was going to be healthy enough. And when he was limited on Wednesday, it sent a small red flag up, but then limited today on Thursday, it's over. He's probably not playing. But that's why we wait for that information before we are super concrete on something, because there's so many variables to this whole thing. And speaking of variables, Dave, we got thrown a wrench. Jonathan Grenard is listed on the injury report, limited on Thursday with a hamstring. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. I don't know why, but I do. That would be a devastating blow to what this defense is, especially with Andrew Van Ginkel limited in practice the last 2 days.
I agree. And the only one that had anything more than, hey, his name popped up was Gessling. Said, we talked to him after practice and he seemed in a good mood. That was it. That's all we have.
Yeah, pretty much. It's
and it's scary because we know hammies take a while to heal, and hopefully it's just, something minor, but because we could sure use him. Good thing Van Ginkel is back.
Yeah. Van Ginkel being limited 2 consecutive days is a good sign. If he plays, that's going to be massive. And then if Grenard ends up playing too, it makes things so much more multiple for what this defense can be. The fact that now you have Van Ginkel and Turner, who can basically just play off-ball linebacker full time if they really wanted to. And Jonathan Grenard's the game wrecker at edge rusher. He only has 1 sack, but his impact has been massive across the board. And that's why it's really hard to say, oh, sacks. And I see it all the time. I'm asked about what Turner only has 1 sack. It's not the only way to measure performance. Pressures are a better measure of performance. In 85 pass rush reps, he has 14 pressures. Sorry, it's 12 pressures. And that's at 14.12% of all pass rushes. That's a good number, especially for a guy who is young. He's only 22. He turns 23 February 2nd, and he's got a lot of room to grow. This is a long-term play, and he's already playing at a very good level. He's playing at a starter level. Now you want him to take the next leap and play at closer to a Pro Bowl level. I think that'll be next year. But he's got his body right, and he's going to keep improving that over the season and the offseason. He's going to work on his bag of tricks. He's going to work on being a better athlete, being a smarter athlete. And I think that element is going to take a really big step, especially if Brian Flores ends up coming back for a 4th year as the Vikings defensive coordinator, which I'm going to be real, would be incredible for what this defense can be. But we'll see. We'll see how everything looks, how everything manifests, and I'm very, very excited to see how he continues to grow and develop. But if you don't have Grenard, Dave, that's a bad one. That's a really bad one.
Now, injuries on the offensive line.
Improved. Donovan Jackson is a full participant in practice, which is a signal that he is going to start on Sunday. Christian Darrisaw had his mandatory rest day, and that's a good sign as well. Brian O'Neill remained limited, so he didn't take a step back, but he probably didn't take any kind of step forward either because he was still limited. But with these classifications, sometimes you don't fully know who is going to be ready to go and who is not. Question in the chat from T-Bass about Blake Cashman. The tough part about these injuries is you don't know 100%, even if they're full participants, if they're going to be activated or not. I believe Blake Cashman will be activated. But remember, TJ Hawkinson was a full participant for like 2 weeks before he got fully activated coming back from his torn ACL. So I'm very bullish on the idea of Cashman returning, but we'll find out if he does. That decision has to come by 3:00 on Saturday, where he would have to be activated and added to the active roster. So we'll know more over the course of time what that kind of looks like, but I would expect that Blake Cashman is going to return. As far as the rest of the injury report, not a whole lot else to really be concerned with. Tyler Batty was still a full participant. And nobody else really made a move. It was just kind of status quo. Nobody wasn't a participant other than Christian Darrisaw, and that's a rest thing. So we don't really have to worry about that. The Grenard one is going to be the big one to watch. If he doesn't play, look, I'm not going to say it's catastrophic, but he's the third best player on this team. It would be catastrophic, borderline for what that defense likes to do and how they achieve it. And then if Van Ginkel's out, your starting edge rushers are Dallas Turner and Bo Richter. And I like Turner, but he's the third best edge rusher on this team. And Bo Richter is a guy that should get like 5 to 10 snaps a game and play special teams and not play a full workload. So that could be catastrophic for how this defense wants to operate, and it could severely limit Brian Flores, and that is not a good sign. So that's worth keeping an eye out for over the next couple of days, because Friday is going to tell us, hey, who's in, who's out for sure. Stuff can change on Saturday. And then who they elevate from the practice squad. Is Gabe Murphy even healthy enough? We don't know, because they don't have to list practice squad players on these injury reports. He hurt his knee. We believe it was an MCL, but he hasn't been activated in a few weeks. Is he ready to go? We'll find out. But the injury report is, it's a tough one right now. It's a very tough one, Dave. And news about Carson Wentz makes it a little tougher.
Mm-hmm. T-Bass is being a pain because of McCarthy. Now, it depends on the injury. Some injuries you can play with, some injuries you can't without doing further damage.
I think with the McCarthy thing, it's just because he's young and inexperienced. If Justin Jefferson was limited for 3 days of practice with a high ankle sprain, they'd probably play him. But it's also Justin Jefferson. He's been in the league for 6 years now. He's a very smart player, and he understands how to play the game at the highest level possible. McCarthy is still learning a lot of those processes, so it's a little bit of a different scale. Now, you ask about Brian O'Neill. If O'Neill was a rookie right tackle, they may be treating him the same way as McCarthy. I do believe it's only because of his inexperience that McCarthy hasn't come back yet. Because they played Jordan Love when he was like 70% last year in week 4. Remember that? He couldn't move. Odie, you're fine.
Odie doesn't think so.
Oh, somebody just rang my doorbell.
Well, Jordan Love couldn't move, and everybody remembers Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game hobbling around on a high ankle sprain. But that was, you got to win the AFC Championship. We're not there with J.J. McCarthy, not even close. So it is what it is. Jefferson with a high ankle, ridiculous take. Yeah, probably Northfields. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, there was a girl. I think she was trying to sell chocolate bars. You know those fundraisers where it's like the dollar chocolate bars. I don't think she looked very confused because like our security system, there's a camera, like a Ring doorbell. So I'm like, hey, I'm actually recording a live show right now. Can you come back later? She's like, okay. Not everybody in the neighborhood knows what I do. So, yeah, I think the injury reports can be interesting. The Eagles side, Dave, is really interesting. Jalen Carter took a step back. He was limited on Wednesday after being a full participant with that heel injury that he missed last Thursday night's game against the New York Giants with. I opined earlier on X's and SKOLs. Please go check that out. High recommend. Some great ball talk with Luke Braun. One of the big things with Jalen Carter missing that game was I didn't know, and I don't think anybody knows how exactly why he missed that game. And I was curious if it had anything to do with the fact that it was MetLife. And MetLife is notorious for causing injuries and having a poor field surface. And players love playing on grass, but there's nothing worse than playing on a bad grass surface. There's a difference between playing on grass and playing on a bad grass surface. So not everybody loves playing on turf either, but it's a bad surface at MetLife. Nobody wants to play on it. So
go hybrid.
I don't think you can do that.
Yes,
is that a thing in football?
The Packers have, and they just laid a new hybrid turf in the new Buffalo Stadium.
Now, is it a hybrid in the fact that the grass is multiple different strains, or is that a hybrid between actual artificial turf and grass?
I think it's artificial turf and grass.
I've never heard of that. That's so interesting. I'll have to look that up later after the show because if they can do that, that sounds great. Because theoretically, you should be able to have a quality grass surface at every stadium. It's a little more expensive, but you should be able to. And then the Cleveland Browns Pittsburgh Steelers game, because the Steelers share a stadium. And because the Steelers share a stadium with the Pitt Panthers, that grass surface is a little rough. And there were a lot of complaints about that grass surface after the game. Players went to the NFLPA complaining about it. So if Jalen Carter did choose to skip the game, I wouldn't have blamed him. It's not necessarily the greatest thing in the world, but you can understand the why behind it. Now, with Jalen Carter moving forward, Dave, you have a player who's arguably the best defensive tackle in the NFL other than Chris Jones and Dexter Lawrence. Like, this dude is a monster. And thank God he's not on the Bears, because he almost did end up on the Bears. The Eagles traded a future 4 to move up one spot to get him. Oh, and luckily we only have to deal with him every so often. But if he doesn't play, that's a massive deal with their pass rush, a massive deal with their run defense, and especially is running mate Jordan Davis, who's also on the injury report, but he's a full participant. The other big one for the Eagles is Quinyon Mitchell was a full participant after being limited on Wednesday. He pulled his hamstring against the Giants, missed the rest of that game. But if he plays, that's a huge asset to them because Cooper DeJean plays in the slot, and then Quinyon Mitchell's their stud on the outside. If he doesn't play, it's a Dory Jackson and Keely Ringo, who has hips that move like the Titanic. And Ringo is not a good football player. He was a former 5-star. And yeah, no bueno.
That's not a description you want for a cornerback.
No, it bad. It real bad. So we'll catch up on Friday and kind of see how that ends up all looking. But that's the injury report. And it's a big factor of why the Vikings could win or lose this game. Who plays and who doesn't. And we'll have a better sense on Friday. We'll have a even more of a sense Saturday and Sunday. It's an ever-evolving story. You never know with injuries how they're going to either get better or worse or stay the same. You think you know, but you don't. And that's the tough part. But there is a lot to kind of look forward to from that perspective and multiple others. I think we should kind of shift the focus to kind of some game plan stuff on how to attack both these teams. But before we get to the game plan stuff, Dave, I think we should inform our friends about Underdog Fantasy. And tonight's game between the Steelers and the Bengals, Trey Hendrickson and Cam Taylor-Britt are not playing for the Bengals. And that could mean some really big numbers for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Jaylen Warren is back, and he is going to be in the backfield. I would heavily consider higher on his rushing and or receiving yards because they're not going to have their best edge rusher and their best outside corner. Maybe some DK Metcalf action would be good too. Then it's very simple. All you got to do is use the promo code Forno, and you could win, as it says on the screen, up to 5,000 times your money. That first $5 play, you'll get $100 in bonus credits. And I've had a lot of fun on this app over the course of the last few weeks and all year long. Hey, CFL is this weekend too. My Blue Bombers are fighting for that playoff spot in the crossover slot, and they need a win on Friday against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who are the number one team in the West. And if you love the CFL, you know how big that is. They lost the Banjo Bowl and the Labor Day Classic, so they got to get a win here. Promo code Forno, Forno, in any of those states that you see, and you'll be able to get those $100 in bonus credits as well. But remember, it is all about fun. And if you feel you have too much, please call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Yep. T-Bass is taking the Eagles.
Hey, I completely understand taking the Eagles. Here's the thing with betting. Never bet with your heart. Always bet with your brain. And you know what? If you bet on the Eagles and the Vikings win, well, guess what? You hedged. So you're not going to be a loser no matter what. But yeah, with betting, always bet with your brain. Because betting with your heart...
Yes, it will cause problems.
Cause big ones. I think there's a couple things that are going to define this game from an on-field perspective outside of the injuries, Dave. One of them we talked about in X's and SKOLs, and I want to talk about a little bit more. It's Brian Flores taking on Jalen Hurts. And what Jalen Hurts is bad at it fits into right what the Vikings do in their wheelhouse. So a couple of stats here for you that are honestly really, really fascinating. So Jalen Hurts struggles the most against the zone. He's 13th in EPA per play against man, 28th against zone. But it's significantly worse against zone when he is blitzed. Over 36 dropbacks, he averages negative 0.32 EPA per play. So expected points added. And, that's kind of sick, T-Bass. But go Bombers. And on the flip side, the Vikings are number one in the NFL in EPA per dropback when they run zone coverage at negative 0.33 EPA per play. And on 44 dropbacks where they have blitzed, it is negative 0.57 EPA per play. And let's put that into perspective. JJ McCarthy's first three quarters against the Bears, that 0.57 EPA per play is worse than McCarthy's performance against the Bears. Like, we're talking real bad. The Vikings absolutely decimate teams when they blitz and they run zone coverage behind it. But they have been playing man coverage a little bit. They have 38 dropbacks this year where they have played man, and they're averaging a negative 0.01 EPA per play, 12th in the league. So they're okay, but it's a small sample size, and all it's going to take is 180-yard touchdown to A.J. Brown to completely make that a catastrophic data point. So the one thing that's interesting is when the Vikings do run zone and blitz, it's a 4.6 yards per attempt. Jalen Hurts against the blitz when it's zone, 4.69 yards per attempt. So you're almost looking at equality there. And the Vikings, when they play man with the blitz and without a blitz, average 3.4 yards when they blitz and 3.7 yards per attempt when they don't. They are not letting teams take them down the field in man coverage, but small sample size. The Vikings do lead the league in yards or in average depth of target, and allowing only 5.9 yards per target. They're not letting teams throw deep on them. They're not letting teams even attempt intermediate throws. It's short. Everything is short. the Aaron Rodgers quick game stuff that we saw against the Steelers, that's what they want. They want you to have to earn every single yard. And it's death by 1,000 cuts. The first one, that stings. Second one, And you just keep saying until all of a sudden your arms and legs are just covered and you're bleeding out. That's how Brian Flores wants to operate his defense. He wants you to have to kill you slowly. Because if you can kill us slowly, good for you. But they're not going to let you use a gun or a knife. They're going to make you use a fork. And it makes it significantly harder to end up doing any of that. And Flores has made a living in the NFL of doing that, to where you can't get those explosive plays. You can't make these huge gains unless it's a DK Metcalf slot route or a slant route where Ivan Pace completely botches the coverage. Then you have like two guys taking awful angles, and Metcalf, being a 6'3" sprinter, can just take it upfield and house it from 80 yards out. It takes the Vikings making mistakes for that to happen, not because the other team just gets you. And that's where this defense really separates themselves. They make it so you have to make a spectacular play and not to where you can just, hey, the Vikings are just going to scheme something up. That's not really how this works. And I think factoring everything in, Brian Flores is going to run a lot of zone. He's going to make Jalen Hurts hit the hole shot. He's going to make him read the coverage. He's not going to let him just be like, all right, throw a deep ball up to Devonta Smith because it's 3rd down and long. Nope, they're going to have that covered. They're going to make them inch down the field, and they're going to make them run the football, something that they haven't been very good at this year, especially compared to last year. Last year was a little historic, so you expected some kind of regression. Now, regression isn't always a linear thing. Like Saquon Barkley ran for 2,000 yards last year. He wasn't going to do that again. But if he ran for 1,700 yards, you're still really happy. But that's also regression. They are not running the football at such a high level. The offensive line is worse than it was last year because, I mean, Lane Johnson's still a monster. Jordan Mailata has been a little more up and down than he has in recent years. Landon Dickerson has missed multiple games with an ankle injury. And Tyler Steen, the replacement at right guard for Mekhi Becton, is not as good of a player. So you have warts, and they're not able to generate the same kind of explosive runs as they would have liked. There is hope for this Vikings team that they can get the run game figured out. And one of the ways they can get the run game figured out is by having Blake Cashman back. Ivan Pace Jr. does such a great job of being able to penetrate, being able to get in the backfield and make plays. But there are two problems that he presents. One, his tackling has been very subpar this year. And two, when he likes to play a guessing game. And when he does play the guessing game, Dave, he gets wrong way too much. Because he gets wrong, then he needs somebody to backfill. He needs somebody to fix his mistake. Cashman does that. Who doesn't do that? Eric Wilson. And having Cashman back will just be a huge, huge benefit for this Vikings team. And there's another aspect of the run defense, Dave, that we talked about earlier on X's and Skulls as well. The Javon Hargrave effect, where he just keeps getting washed out with these double teams. But Brian Flores kind of spun it. And we talked with Luke about this extensively because he thinks that Hargrave is being quiet benched. I thought that they're almost using Hargrave as a decoy to help other players out. Where, hey, Hargrave, you're just going to have two guys wash you out, which you don't want. I'm not saying that you want it, but hey, this is what's happening, so let's use it to our advantage kind of thing. Like every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Well, you give us this action, we're going to react like this, and we're going to use that. Oh, we know you're going to wash them out, so we're going to adjust how we're fitting the run to compensate for that. Now, is that the way you want to play football? No, you just want to have a guy who can stand up decently against double teams, not get displaced more than like a yard off of the line, and hold up and make plays. Harrison Phillips wasn't perfect at nose tackle. I did not think nose tackle was his prime position, but he was good enough at it. And being good enough at it really helped the fact that this Vikings defense could be so multiple. But here's where people lose me when we're talking so much about the run defense. They're still second in EPA per play allowed. They're sixth in success rate. And they're first in EPA per dropback allowed. They are stopping the pass. And when you stop the pass, you can only care so much about the run game. You don't want to ignore it. You don't want to completely give up on it. But I'm forcing you to run the football to beat me. You are not getting explosive plays. You are not going to be able to throw a lot. You are going to have to pound the rock and pound it down our throats. Last year, the Vikings were second in the league in run defense. They were like 28th in the league in pass yards allowed. But they were still a top 5 defense overall as far as what their yardage allowed was. And the reason why the pass defense was so poor is because the Vikings would get up so much, they had to pass. So it was a little bit of a catch-22. Oh, you're so poor at pass defense. They weren't poor. They were allowing volume stats when the game was like over. And that's why you look at numbers like EPA per play and success rate, because they give you a better viewpoint of how the performance actually is. And when I look at this defense, they're dominating against the pass. They're allowing 133 yards per game on the run, but they're number 1 in pass yards allowed. So who cares? They're crushing it. And passing is the easiest way to score in the National Football League in the year of our Lord 2025. This isn't the 80s or 90s when the run game was still king. You were taking running backs constantly in the top 5 because they could be viewed as franchise game changers. Those guys don't exist anymore outside of like Bijan, Christian McCaffrey. But even in real time, Christian McCaffrey wasn't viewed as like that kind of player. He was like a half a tier below. Saquon Barkley was viewed as a franchise changer. It took him 6 years to get there. So making you beat them by running the football, I think it's actually a pretty smart strategy because they are good enough at times to be able to chase down the tackler. They are good enough to be able to stop the run, but they're not going to be able to do it super consistently. The one interesting thing about the Vikings run defense is they are not in the bottom 10 to 12. They're in the top 20 in success rate. I think they're 19th in success rate at stopping the run. So they're allowing some big gashes, but on a down-to-down basis, they're not doing that bad.
And that's without Cashman most of the time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Big Real and Dad, hey, a year of membership. Awesome. Hey, you can get more out of that membership, Big Real and Dad, if you join the Vikings First and School Discord, where I have 4 YouTube members. The Rumor Mill channel, where whenever I hear some juicy gossip throughout the course of the NFL or college football, I share it there. And that is only for members of the YouTube channel, but you have to be in the Discord. That is a way to maximize that membership.
Like if he hears we're going to trade for a nose stuffing defensive tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something that Dave and Darren are going to talk about extensively on Tool Blogger Saturday morning at 10:05. So you'll want to tune in for that. I even gave him a name to add to his list. So I'm really excited to hear what he thinks of that player. I'm not going to share the details, but he had a pretty good list. But I think my guy's the best option on that list because, of course. Here. T-Bass says, Vikings ownership needs to hire someone to oversee the draft next year. And NFL GM doesn't like it. They can tell him there's the door. No, Kwesi needs to oversee the draft. He's fine. Look, at this point, we just have to eliminate the 2022 draft. It stunk. He learned from it. It was his first draft on the job, and he was 3 months in. He got all his processes together, and he's been significantly better at drafting. Like, that 2024 draft looks like a home run. If J.J. McCarthy becomes the starter long-term for Minnesota, it's a massive home run. Because you have a quality starter already in Dallas Turner. Kyrie Jackson is just an unfortunate tragedy, so you just have to make that a wash. And then Walter Rouse is a quality swing tackle, Michael Juergens is your potential starting center. You have a good kicker in Will Reichard, and Levi Drake Rodriguez is a really good rotational defensive tackle. You picked 232nd overall. He's fine now. He still deserves criticism, but I'm not going to entertain the idea of moving on from him as the general manager or the guy in charge of the draft just because he had a bad 2022 draft. That it is what it is. Bulldog LLC hates Kwesi because he's just so phony and corporate. Look, he talks like a politician. So does KOC. I don't think he's phony at all. I just think it's really hard to kind of quantify. He's just a great orator. He understands how to say everything that he wants you to hear without saying what he doesn't want you to know. And he gives really thoughtful answers without giving you all the details. Look, I don't think that makes him phony. He's good at his job. Because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to give the media enough to where he's like the media gets enough to where they don't keep pestering you. And I think he's done a pretty solid job over the course of the last few years. I'll answer this from Two Evil Hope, and then we're going to move on because I want to talk about the offense a little bit. Over the course of the last 3 drafts, I think they've looked pretty good. Donovan Jackson, day 1 starter. Ty Felton, good special teams player. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, like I don't like the Ty Felton pick, but I think for what you're getting out of him right now, it's okay. We'll see what that looks like long term. But you don't need to have 3rd round picks, especially at 102, contribute year 1. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins is already a rotational player. Kobe King is a good special teamer. Gavin Bartholomew, you still have no idea if you'll get anything, but that's because he got hurt. And the 2024 draft class could be a massive home run. That could end up being, Dave, like talked about in a similar vein for that 2015 class. Because if Levi Drake Rodriguez becomes a starter in the 7th round, and Michael Juergens becomes a starter in the 7th round, and then those 2 first-round picks hit, that's like a legendary class in Vikings history. Because that's a lot. 2023, Jordan Addison, big hit. Mekhi Blackmon, that one kind of stings, but I don't think Blackman's been like an elite player for the Colts. We'll see if they were right or wrong for trading him when they did. Jay Ward's a solid backup that you got it late in the 4th round. And we have to remember, the hit rate is about 50% in the 1st round, and then it significantly drops every round after that. And if you're going to criticize Kwesi for his poor drafting, you have to give him credit for the TJ Hawkinson trade because he traded picks to get a Pro Bowl caliber tight end. That's a part of it. I don't think he's been perfect, but I think we look at the 2022 draft and just believe that he's just this terrible general manager, which it was a terrible draft. It was. It's really hard to defend that draft in almost any way at this point. But that does not mean the rest of his picks have been bad. And I think he's not given nearly enough credit for the hits. It's always Lewis Cine was bad. Andrew Booth was bad. Ed Ingram was bad, which I will fight that he wasn't. You guys know that. Brian Asamoah did not pan out. That's rough. But that's not the end-all, be-all. Rick Spielman kind of rolled the coattails of that 2015 draft for a few years. He didn't really have a good year until 2020 when he got, or 2021. Justin Jefferson he got in 2020, but 2021 gave you Cam Bynum, gave you Christian Darrisaw, gave you Pat Jones, who's a good rotational guy. 2020 gave you Josh Metellus. It gave you Justin Jefferson. There were a lot of flaws in those drafts. Yeah, it's a complicated question to answer, but not everybody's willing to give you the proper context to break everything down individually. I just want to say Kwesi bad because a lot of people don't like him because he's an analytics guy. Well, here's the thing. A good manager does not have to be the best scout in the room. He does not have to be the smartest guy in the room. He has to be the guy that can filter out information and make the best decisions. There arguably has been no better general manager navigating free agency over the past few years than Kwesi, and managing the salary cap and getting that healthy. There's so many other things than just drafting when it comes to being a general manager. He has to improve in drafting, but he has been, and he hasn't gotten enough credit for it. And I don't think he's a perfect GM. I'd give him like a B+. But the Vikings, under his leadership, are 37-19 while rebuilding the entire organization. I'm sorry, that's a success. And when I see comments, even if they're in jest or even if they're just kind of messing around or just out of frustration for other things like McCarthy not playing, I'm going to defend him because it's too much gets lost. And I think a lot of that has to do with social media, Dave, to where people will be very frustrated about the fact that X, Y, or Z hasn't happened yet. And I think it gets too extrapolated. Like accounts like the Purple Persuasion that just rage bait all the time. No, let's get down to the actual facts. Let's get down to the actual information instead of just trying to incite a riot on social media. You guys know that's not what I'm about. I'm about trying to just be honest and giving analysis with integrity. And that's why I'm glad that you guys come here every single week. And while you're here, as Norcius would say, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe and ring the bell. Dr. Proto makes a great point to kind of wrap it up before we go to the offense. He's improving. Yeah. He's getting better. He's learning from mistakes. And that's the big thing. If you make a mistake and you learn from it, especially because, and one question I would ask Kwesi is, when you fail at the first time doing something, like a pick, like you failed with the Lewis Seam pick, how do you know that you need to completely adapt your strategy because one data point ended up being incorrect? Like, how do you quantify that? Because one data point, that can mean everything. It can mean nothing because it's a very small sample size. So I'm very intrigued about his process from an overall perspective to where, hey, how do you overreact or underreact? And how do you know what's the right move when you have a limited sample size? So like if you were to take a safety, Dylan Thieneman from Oregon, who's a very good football player in the first round of this next draft, well, then maybe it wasn't, the lesson that he learned wasn't that Lewis Seam was a bad pick because he was a safety. It was because of other reasons. And it's the whole thing. We'll break it down this offseason, Kwesi, because I think we have enough data on multiple like draft classes and off seasons to where he deserves like a couple offseason deep, like a couple episode deep dive to where we can break down what he is, where he's going, and how he's leading this team, because it's a complicated issue that you cannot flesh out in 280 characters on Twitter. You just can't do it. It would take me probably like 1,500, 2,000 words if I were to write an article on it. It's a complicated one. And I appreciate you guys being good with me going off on this tangent, because I want the truth. I don't want, for lack of a better term, uneducated opinions, because I think a lot of the people that are in these comments do have a good football base behind them, and they're very passionate. But sometimes passion can lead us astray. And yeah, Kwesi good. Kwesi very good. I'll say that. Do you have anything to say, Dave?
Vikings have been an organization and played since 1961. We have not won a Super Bowl yet. And I understand people get a little bit frustrated at that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I totally get it. Big Real and Dad. Yeah, send us a message. We can help you with Discord after the show. I have it in, once you get joined in the welcome channel. There is a link in there how to link your YouTube channel with the membership to Discord, so then it gives you access. That's the only way you can do it. And it's a very simple process. If you ask Chuck in the chat, he's done it. Jason in the chat has done it. I don't know if Jason's here tonight, but I remember seeing Chuck earlier. So it's a pretty simple process. It basically like redirects you and yada, yada, yada. So let's talk about the offense, because I think with Carson Wentz starting, it kind of gives us a semblance of what we're going to see. We're probably going to see a lot of the quick game stuff, but that's also what Fangio wants you to do. He wants you to run a lot of that quick game stuff. They want to keep everything in front of you, and they don't want you to go over the top. They're going to play a lot of cover two. They're going to play a lot of quarters, quarter, half, where it's quarters on one side and cover two on the other. And Luke mentioned it. They're probably going to do what's called Zeus. And it's called Zeus 18 for the reason being Justin Jefferson is 18. So whatever side Jefferson's on is going to be the cover two side. The other side will be quarters. And that is going to be the call, because they want to have that safety over the top being able to protect. And is it the smartest play? Well, it's worked significantly for the Vic Fangio style defense over the course of time. And you want to be able to give your cornerback help. And I think that, like, I don't think Vic Fangio really plays sides because of how that defense operates. So you're going to have instances where Jefferson's not on Quinyon Mitchell. You're going to have instances where he's on Quinyon Mitchell. But you have Jordan Addison who can beat the other guy on the opposite side. That's why you invested so much in him. That's why I think that they would be, unless he continues to make off the field mistakes, it would be a mistake to not sign him. Because we've seen across the league, you can sign two big name wide receivers. You can have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. You can have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And both those teams are paying a quarterback. There's a cost, absolutely. And it can be tough if you have a bunch of injuries. But it also depends on how you build your team, how you build up the back-end infrastructure. And this upcoming draft is going to be about building up that back-end infrastructure. It's going to be about getting players on cheap contracts. It's going to be about trying to find developmental pieces and special teams aces. And that's a big thing. We always think about, oh, this guy can be a future starter. Sometimes they're just a special teamer. And that guy can rule. Josh Metellus was drafted with the idea he's just a special teamer. And he worked his way up to being a top 15 paid safety in football. So the Vikings are going to prioritize intelligence, especially on defense. So if you wanted to pay Addison, plus the broadcast deals are coming up in 2028. And what that means for the Vikings is Justin Jefferson's going to need a new extension around that time. And Jordan Addison is going to kick in around that time. But the cap is going to go sky high, because whenever a new television deal goes into place, the players get a significant portion of that. And that goes to the salary cap. So the salary cap, just from those new TV deals that get signed, could go up. And maybe I'm over exaggerating. It could go up like $50 million a year, because these television contracts are just bonkers good. And they're already getting like $2.5 billion, like from each network, but they could get like $4 or $5 billion a year. Like just insane numbers, but they deliver ratings and they deliver it constantly. That matters. Television ratings are a big deal, and the NFL keeps breaking their own records. So
and throw in the gambling that's growing with it.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of factors here, and that will end up helping this Vikings offense. But the reality of the offense is simple. Protect Carson Wentz enough so he can get the ball out in rhythm and structure. And also, when it comes to the passing game, you really need to focus on getting the open guy the football. You can trust Justin Jefferson, and you should a few times a game, where you just like, screw it. Justin Jefferson's open. Let's throw it to him. But you don't have to do that because of how this defense is structured. Just take what they give you. If they give you a 5-yard option route to TJ Hawkinson, take it and say thank you. And then go to 2nd and 5. They give you a 6-yard out route to Jordan Addison, thank you. Just take it and move on. And then you can set them up for a deep shot later in the game. This Eagles team is beatable. They are probably the most talented on paper team in the National Football League. But they're beatable because they aren't all the way there yet when it comes to a structural standpoint, a schematic standpoint. Having Vic Fangio year after year is a good thing. But at the end of the day, Dave, when you have an offensive coordinator that just hasn't been able to figure it out yet and get in rhythm with this unit, it's a problem. And they dealt with this in 2023 with Brian Johnson. I think it was 2023, the year after their Super Bowl run. Brian Johnson wasn't good. They had to let him go. He's a very good coach, but he was not a good play caller for that team. And what is it, Nick Patullo? Is that it? I think that's the name.
It's Patullo.
Okay. He hasn't been good so far.
No,
but it takes
and he's
time.
very, very predictive.
It takes time. It takes getting used to. Some of that predictiveness is on Jalen Hurts. Some of that is on the offensive coordinator. Hurts is a limited quarterback. Like, we can just call a spade a spade. He's a limited quarterback that can't do everything. You have to limit what your playbook is because of who Jalen Hurts is. And that can limit you as a play caller. But you can still be creative within those limits. That matters. That's a big factor here. And I do believe that when you're the Minnesota Vikings, you can figure things out. And I think that they'll be able to take advantage of this Eagles offense. But they got to stop Saquon. Saquon hasn't had a great year so far. I do think forcing Saquon to beat you is probably your best bet to win, because they have not been a great running team this year. They've been very predictable. You get Blake Cashman back, and Jalen Hurts just has not been the guy. You're just going to be able to play your basic coverages, then run your blitzes and take care of business. And then Saquon's going to have a good game against a very good defense. And I think the Vikings can take care of this team. I don't know what this final score will be. I would predict something like 24-20. It'll go either way. But I think this Vikings team is being a little overlooked right now. The Eagles are not in a great place. So I am very intrigued to see what ends up happening. But that is going to be our show.
David says that we have the perfect opportunity to take advantage of the Eagles. And I agree with him.
Yes, we absolutely do. And we will be back. I will be back on the show Monday night, and then I'll be on the post-game show on Sunday. Dave and Darren on 2 Old Bloggers will be ready to go on Saturday morning at 10:05, talking all about this game and talking about defensive tackle trades.
And Drew will be there for the theme 3 for Inside the Numbers, and he's got some pretty interesting ones.
There we go. And then also, since you guys are still here, make sure you check out X's and Skulls from earlier today. And then Dave had a Skulling with Friends as well, talking with an Eagles podcaster about this game and getting the other side's perspective. Those will be also up on the audio feed as well. A lot of stuff to get you prepared for Sunday's game. And we're going to keep this rolling. Next week will be a little bit of a condensed week because of the Thursday night game. But the Real Forno Show will be your preview. It will be your pregame show leading in to Thursday Night Football. And then we'll have the live at the 2-minute warning post-game show as well. And we will have a lot more for you there too. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, do all those things. Help us out. It's free to do so, and it makes a huge difference. And we will see you next time. Skol Vikings, everybody.